In 1756, a massive war rages the world. Millions die, and barely anyone knows this war. This is often called a True World War I or World War Zero. This is the 7 Years' War.
The 7 Years' War was a global war that lasted from 1756 to 1763. Although it's known as mainly the 7 Years' War, it's also known as the French and Indian War in North America.
The 7 Years' War was a global war that broke the limits of battling. It also had many boundaries between countries. This war took place on 5 continents. It also had many types of artillery used in it. It was the most important war during the 1700s. After years of skirmishes and small fights between Britain, Spain, and France in North America, Britain first declared war on France in 1756. These disputes were caused by the wanting of land and territory throughout the world.
Aside from all of this fight in North America, there was something else going on in Europe. There was this other war, the Third Silesian War, where Frederick the Great, the King of Prussia, was fighting military troops from Austria, France, Russia, and Sweden. In the years of 1740 to 1748, the War of the Austrian Succession took place. In this war, the Austrians won the war, but Prussia, led by Frederick the Great, gained the province of Silesia through the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. Now the Austrians wanted Silesia back.
In an attempt to gain allies, Frederick the Great allied himself with George III of Britain. King Louis XV of France was angered by this alliance and joined the Austrian-Russian alliance. With all these alliances, it made it another factor for the cause of this war.
In Europe, Frederick knew that the Austrians would try to quickly regain Silesia, so he decided to quickly take their capital. He did this by invading the small country of Saxony.
By the 1750s, a portion of Canada, a large portion of Central North America, and the Great Lakes was in the control of the French. During that time also, the British controlled a large portion of Canada and the 13 colonies that were by the Atlantic Ocean. There was some land around the upper Ohio River Valley that separated these two countries from each other, and it became a place with a lot of conflicts between the French, British, and even the Native Americans. These conflicts with fighting with the armed forces didn't go well for Britain. It's because the French built Fort Duquesne and had Native Americans as their allies. With this, they were able to keep beating the British. But what was important about Fort Duquesne? Well, it served as another one of the French military bases and it held troops just in case the French needed them. It was also used to develop trade and alliance with the indigenous people who lived there. It was also placed at a strategic location where they could access many rivers and the Great Lakes. They were able to control the Ohio, Allegheny, and Monongahela rivers. But most importantly, they could block the British expansion into the Ohio country.
The French and Indian War would eventually start because of one famous man, George Washington. When a mysterious letter arrives at his fort, he decides to sign it. What he doesn't realize is that he has just signed a document admitting to the murder of a French official. Eventually, Washington would aid General Braddock in an attempt to take Fort Duquesne, the original reason Washington was there. Washington advised walking in a separated order instead of the classic lines because the redcoats were easy targets. Eventually, Braddock and his men were sabotaged and Braddock died in the battle. During the time period from 1754 to 1756, the British were facing defeat after defeat without gaining any ground. Finally, in 1757, the British strategy in North America changed. Thanks to William Pitt, Britain started sending more money to the colonies. With renewed energy, the British finally managed to capture Fort Duquesne and Fort Frontenac. The 7 Years' War was mainly fought by proxy wars. A proxy war is when two other countries or states indirectly fight each other by supplying one side of a country in a civil war. The Fantastic War was another proxy war of the 7 Years' War. This was fought between the Portuguese and the Spanish colonies in South America. By the Rio de la Plata, which is currently between Uruguay and Argentina, the Spanish army saw lots of success. They captured 3 forts which were located in Uruguay. Then the Spanish saw even more success in Rio Grande do Sul, a southern Brazilian province. They managed to take the entire state. The Portuguese army saw their success in Mato Grosso in western Brazil. They managed to defend and conquer that disputed territory, while they saw even more success in Rio Negro Valley in the Amazons. The Portuguese captured the whole river valley and built 2 fortresses. The Portuguese eventually won the Fantastic War.
British and French tensions would rise once again in India. Although a previous war was supposed to end tensions between these 2 countries, it still continued. The fighting would first take place in Bengal, where the British army defeated the French and the Nawab of Bengal's army. While this was going on, the French attempted to siege the British colony's capital. Eventually, Colonel Stringle rallied the British troops, and they managed to push the French all the way back to the capital. Now, the Battle of Plassey would be one of the most important battles of the war. It would be the battle in which the British army would gain control of all of Bengal and India. The Prussian army saw lots of failures during the early stages of the war. The invasion of Saxony was not as successful as Frederick had hoped. They had not been able to take the Austrian capital and had barely controlled any of the small country. Also, the British state of Hanover, present-day Germany, was being invaded by the French, leaving them exposed. To make things worse, the Russian army was approaching Prussia fast, and Frederick's own sister, the Queen of Sweden, declared war on him. After Frederick won the Battle of Prague, he was pushed from all sides. He then wins the Battle of Rossbach and Leuthen.
Frederick would soon receive a stroke of luck as Queen Elizabeth of Russia would die and would be replaced by Peter III. Peter had adored Frederick the Great and had quickly switched sides in the war. Sadly for Frederick, Peter's reign would last shortly as his wife would assassinate him and take the throne. Catherine the Great, the new Queen of Russia, would quickly pull out of the war.
Eventually, with the exit of Russia from the war, the Franco-Austrian-Russia alliance would fall and would sign an armistice with Prussia.
Finally, after 7 years of fighting, the Treaty of Paris would end the war. As a result, the 7 Years' War eventually would kill up to a staggering 1.4 million deaths. It would become the largest and deadliest war in the 17th century. It led to many boundary changes between the countries.
After the French and Indian War, a lot of the French troops got out of the previously French claims in North America, so the majority of the land was split between Britain and Spain. So after a lot of French territory losses, they only had the province of Haiti left in the Caribbean.
Although the British won the war, it had a huge impact on its economy and the empire. The debt of Britain increased very greatly. Because of this, British leaders had resentment at the colonists because they felt like they didn't get enough financial or military help from them. This led them to make many acts such as the Townshend, Tea, Stamp, and Intolerable Acts. This would eventually influence the American Revolutionary War.
The 7 Years' War also influenced World War I and World War II because they were also wars fought around the world. And just like the 7 Years' War, it leads to many boundary changes between the countries and makes a lasting impact.